In the last 7 days, Rose and Harriette have stood around while a man's been murdered, the Doctor's been electrocuted for a week, and Jackie now has the strongest glutes in the world from squatting in that position for so long. It's time to review World War III. So as I alluded to last week, this is the episode where most of the story happens, and that starts with the cliffhanger resolution, which, look, this is enjoyable, but it does have its own flaws as well. First of all being this very quick cliffhanger resolution. The Doctor just goes, well, I'm not human, so it's not deadly to me, shoves it in the Slovene, and thank goodness they're all linked somehow. And they all get zapped. I believe, as scripted, the implication is that the devices they wear around their necks, their compression fields, they're all linked, and that is what passes on the signal. I don't think it's a big problem at the time, I accepted it, but it's more that, knowing what comes later and the sophistication of the writing for this series would grow, you expect that sophistication this early on as well. But that's a bit like watching Douglas Adams' Doctor Who from the 70s and comparing it to, say, something like The Censorites, which, in my opinion, is still a good and enjoyable story, but is a lot less sophisticated than even something like Nightmare of Eden, I think would be a fair story to compare it to. More direction problems rear their ugly head as we go through this episode. When the Doctor's escaping in the lift, can he see Harriette and Rose in the corridor? Because it's implied that he can, and so he goes to rescue them, and it implies that Harriette and Rose can see the Doctor, but then the vision from the lift shows them running into shot and around the corner. It's not very well done. And a lot of people criticise the CG Slovene. It's a problem. And the problem is the CG models and the physical suit props have different levels of detail. And I think if the physical suit props match the CG, that would be the easy way around this. But again, this comes from being the first block, and I would rather have Doctor Who be ambitious and get it very slightly wrong than have them go, we can't possibly do a monster chase, so let's just not, let's just do it with reaction shots. No, but beyond the discrepancy in the appearance, I think the big problem is the discrepancy in physicality. When the Slovene are running as the CG versions, they have the profile of an animal, like a cheetah. They're leaning forward, they're leaning into the run. And then when we come back to the suits, they're terribly upright. Now, I'm not blaming the actors or the director, I'm assuming it would be very hard to do it in that big suit. But it just would have been nice if that is something that could have been addressed. But again, first block, I can forgive it. I actually really like the CG Slovene. They remind me of something out of Harryhausen. There's a stop-motion quality to them. That being said, because they had no idea what the CG was really going to look like, there's a very amusing moment where Rose and Harriette are running, and they keep sort of stopping and leapfrogging each other so they can look back to see if they're being pursued, and it's very classic Doctor Who, we must run very slowly so the monsters can almost catch up kind of acting. It's something that the series would get better at as it went on, but it warms my little fanboy heart to see it there. But this episode, of course, is the really big episode for Satire in this two-parter. Now, regarding the cabinet room and those shutters, even those are part of the political satire. The Doctor says they were installed in 1991, and of course in 1991 there was an explosives attack on Downing Street to attempt to kill the Prime Minister by the IRA. Now, the Doctor doesn't directly allude to that attack, but it's something that people at home might then look up and say, oh, why would those have been installed in 1991? We have the Slovene essentially referring to weapons of mass destruction, which was the excuse that Tony Blair, John Howard, and George W. Bush used in the War on Terror. And Harriette obliquely refers to that when Rose, talks about humans lashing out when they feel they're under threat. Harriette says, I voted against all that, thank you very much. And when we add to that Russell T Davies intended to pretty much kill Tony Blair in the first episode of this, It's pretty clear that this message is meant to, kind of say the war on terror, not a good thing, and not a justifiable thing, and what if someone then tried it on us, is what this story is saying, to get the audience thinking what it must be like for people who were affected and had their lives destroyed by this, because suddenly it's us, suddenly it's happening to us, the English-speaking world. And so we get on side with the Doctor because it's this external force, the Slitheen. They're not a race. They're a family business, and they're destroying the world for profit. They're destroying it for fuel, nuclear fuel, equivalent to oil. Russell's satire is incredibly biting here, and perhaps Keith Boke's broad direction kind of helps that satire along in a way. The audience can enjoy the story and then come back and think about the satire. You don't actually need to understand the political situation of the real world to get this story. It works on its own. But understanding the political situation of the world, you kind of go, ooh, Russell. Ooh. One big win of this week's episode is the performances. Everyone is just on fire. Mickey comes to Jackie's rescue, but they have an honest discussion about how this past year has changed them and changed their own relationship. And I like that there would have been a temptation, I think, to have them totally make their peace. But instead, Mickey just states, that he thinks Jackie hates him. And Jackie doesn't really confirm or deny, but it says a lot about Mickey's character that he puts that all aside and they're in this together, they're going to get through this together. And there's a point where Mickey is even willing to sacrifice himself for Jackie. Meanwhile, the Doctor, Rose, and Harriette are trying to figure out a way to save them. It's a genuinely tense scene, really well directed. Everyone's performances are great. Again, Eccleston has that balance of comedy and drama when he realises that the Selena from Raxacoricofallapatorius. Yes, I did spend an hour learning how to say that in the week after this episode went out, although initially I thought it was Raxacoricofallapatorius. And I think, I was corrected on the forums because Russell T Davies gave an interview and gave the spelling of it, I think, so everyone had it right. Raxacoricofallapatorius. Just as last week when Mickey was talking about how his life was affected by Rose's decision to travel with the Doctor and her disappearance for a year, we get a bit more of Jackie's interiority in this, because when she's telling off the Doctor over the phone, he is very dismissive of her saying that he thinks he's so clever, he thinks he's so smart. The Doctor starts listening when he realises that Jackie's concern is for Rose's safety. She doesn't have a problem with Rose being off travelling if Rose is safe, and it is up to the Doctor to guarantee that, because that has been Jackie's job for the last 19 years, and if she's going to hand over that responsibility to someone else, she needs to know that they are up to the task. And I think it is a scene that is very cleverly not answered. It's interrupted by the plot of getting on the website to fire the missiles, and this feels like it's written by someone who their knowledge of cybersecurity is the Norton window popping up on their computer to say, hey, you need a subscription. It works in terms of the plot. It is just believable enough. Especially when you consider data leaks and things, you kind of go, oh, it can't be that simple. It's like, what? There's a website called Have You Been Pwned, which tells you about security breaches on other websites. And you know what? I can believe that Unit would have the same password for everything, and that it would be a simple one-word password. Look, this is not the real world, this is the Doctor Who world. This is a time when the Doctor Who world is very simple because they're still developing it, so you can just about forgive it. It is the sonic screwdriver equivalent of computer security. You don't want the Doctor stopped by a door, you don't want the Doctor stopped by a 20-minute scene where he explains ethical hacking to Mickey. That being said, the Doctor is stopped by a door in this story. This, of course, is the moment that gives Harriette a chance to step up, because the Doctor is paralysed by the fear of losing Rose, and we know that he has fought in this war, that he has lost people, And so there is the pain of that, coupled with the fact that we're developing a very strong connection between the Doctor and Rose. And there's a little subtle moment where the Doctor praises Harriette, where Rose doesn't look too pleased with that. There is a jealousy in their relationship that begins coming in later, but it does kind of start here. Harriette, of course, steps up and says, I am the elected representative, I am the designated survivor, very, very cogent at the moment, and I am commanding you on behalf of the British government to stop these people. And I think it's a great moment for her. It then means at the end of the episode, when she steps up and takes control of the government, ostensibly, it is believable. She goes from being this meek, mild-mannered person who is only concerned with getting funding for her mum's nursing home, and by extension nursing homes around the country, to being the leader of a nation in waiting. And it is a believable transition, and she maintains that heart of caring about the people she is talking to. She is reassuring the people and talking about how the people of the country have survived this. Penelope Wilton is wonderful. We will see more of her. I wish we saw even more as we go on. Finally, we come to the ending where we're assured that the adventures with the Doctor and Rose will continue, but we're also assured that just because the Doctor has had an adventure with Rose's family, he is still a wanderer, he is still an alien, and he still has a different morality. And watching it now, that scene where Rose wants him to come up and have dinner with the family and he just wants to go straight away and he gives her an ultimatum, it's uncomfortable, but I think it's deliberately uncomfortable. You know, that there is always going to be a power imbalance in their relationship, and I think that is essential for Doctor Who to have that imbalance. A couple of times in the classic series there was a more even footing, say with the Doctor and Romana, and that was wonderful, but of course the following producer who came in found them to be too infallible, and I think there's some truth to that as well. Where there is that bit of stress in the relationship between the Doctor and Rose of are they on equal footing, and it means that Rose is not always going to go along with the Doctor's wishes, which provides drama and more story opportunities. And that last scene where the Doctor actually offers Mickey to come with them, I'd kind of forgotten that he offered. You know, I had remembered it as being a bit more begrudging, a bit more, oh, okay, if you want. But Mickey is concerned for Rose, the Doctor is concerned for Rose, and the Doctor invites Mickey along specifically so he can look out for Rose if he so desires. And Mickey doesn't think he's up to it and asks the Doctor not to say. And it's kind of weird that the way the Doctor comes up with not saying that is insulting Mickey, because that's what Rose is kind of expecting, because the Doctor has done that before, so why won't he do it now? But I love how the Doctor is slightly uncomfortable with saying that, because he has developed a genuine respect for Mickey in this story. They have had a little character arc despite not having much on-screen time together. And I'm so glad that Christopher Eccleston spoke to the production team and got Noel more. Whereas Mickey started out as a bit of a buffoon in the first episode and Noel's performance was a bit too broad, by the time we get to the end of this last episode, he is a well-rounded person and being really well played, really sympathetically played, and despite the fact that he ends the episode on an admission of something he can't do, I do feel his character is empowered and will go on to become even more empowered as the series goes on. Just a little thing about Satire. When the other Slovene are turning up, there's a secretary to the Scottish Parliament who turns up who looks a lot like Alex Salmond, who, at the time this episode was made, was the leader of the Scottish National Party and would soon become Scottish First Minister a couple of years after this. And I have to wonder if that was deliberate on Russell's part, because we have real British newsreaders and the political commentator Andrew Marr presenting. We don't have a real American commentator in Lachelle Carl, but she does a very good job and I really like her. But yeah, that was just a little moment that hit me this time, because I think when I first watched this, I hadn't been to the UK. Then I did live in the UK while Salmond was First Minister, so I must have noticed him then. And this time around I went, hold on a sec. So Aliens of London World War III, for me, retains its rating of a 7 out of 10. Of this first batch of 5 episodes, which are a proof of concept for what the series can do, I do think it is the least effective, but it is still an incredible amount of fun to watch. Its flaws come from teething troubles of the series, and it's got a really strong script with excellent performances, some pacing issues, quite a lot of directorial issues, but the only way is up. So, it's time for the viewer mailbag for World War III. Matt Moray-Eel says, insert comment from Aliens of London here. So yeah, this is the comment last week where the satire being on point was raised, and I did say I thought this episode was more satirical because last week was about, you know, getting all the ducks in a row so we could be satirical, but the satire is strong and biting and scathing here. And Russell T Davies makes it very clear that he wishes he could blow up the warmongers with their own weapons, and I think that's a really strong point to end on. I think it could have come off as a bit too preachy had it been more overt, but massive weapons of destruction instead of weapons of mass destruction, I think that's just about as overt as you can get and still be on the ooh, cheeky end rather than, oh, you know, we're being told what to think about this. We're not being told what to think, we're being told what the characters think. But what the characters think is what we as the audience are invited to think because this is what our heroes feel, whereas the villains are the ones who want to kill everyone for the fuel. Nathan Bottomley says, I released the World War III episode of FTE podcast during our wedding ceremony, and it was a lovely wedding too, and I wore a nice hat. Plus, it's brilliant. Joseph Green's massive weapons of destruction speech is a highlight of the whole era. Proper political satire, but with real human consequences. Absolutely right. And despite the fact that, you know, he's been a bit of a jokey villain, whereas the Margaret Blaine villain has been a lot more sinister, he is very sinister in that scene. Joseph Green in that scene, he is pleading to the world. But when he says planet Earth is at war, there's kind of this undercurrent of, yes, you are, but you don't know what war you're in, which I just find a really chilling moment, and the extreme close-up of the face, it's kind of disorientating. And it's a psychological trick to get the audience within the show to believe him. And the Doctor's disgusted reaction to that then tells us everything we need to know about the character. Brilliant stuff. And first-time commentator on one of these videos, Alex Wilcox, has said, a lot, easily the most comedic of the season. Was this deliberately written as farce because otherwise it would have been too dark to bear? Jackie's heartbreak / retaliation, Mickey versus the mob and his own fear, monsters walking in dead skins, political satire both absurdly broad and damning. Big Ben was a more striking image, but continuing Russell's mission to destroy every major landmark in London by blowing up Downing Street just before an election was ballsy. Yeah, of course, there was an election this year in the UK in 2005. Ballsier to say, even if you replace Blair with Green, Labour... I never got that. Gordon Brown, Joseph Green. Oh my god. Labour will still be lying warmongers. It ends on Harriette Jones as an imaginary nice Labour, but even she's a war criminal by... Oh, spoilers! I love this season almost as much as my first, 1975 season 12, which it echoes time and again, but World War III is the darkest mirroring here too. In the 30 years since Robot, Doctor Who went from portraying Britain as the one everyone else trusts to ensure fair play with the nuclear weapons to the one who's broken the rules so many times we've had our toys taken away. Yeah, of course, because back in Robot, the Brigadier says that Britain is the only country that can be trusted with the nuclear launch codes, and the Doctor very satirically and bitingly says, well, naturally, the rest are all foreigners. The Brigadier takes him seriously at first and then gets his point. 15 years further on, World War III looks still less like it overdid the way our diplomatic triumphs were headed. Oh, that went into a downer, but I enjoy this story very much. And I think that is a great hallmark of how strong the satire is in this story. You can still enjoy the story, but it invites you to think about this, and even though we're left with the hope of Harriette Jones, even without considering Christmas, the only way we can kind of feel happy about that is the Doctor says, you know, she's going to lead for 15 years and be this wonderful, benevolent leader, Britain's golden age. And I think Russell is probably less criticising the Labour Party just on its own, and more criticising politics in general. But that being said, the Labour Party was the government at the time, and at the time it was lauded, and in many ways rightly, as a very progressive party, but in other ways, the War on Terror, it did not do a progressive job on that. And that is my personal opinion. Yours may differ, but it is mine, and it is also the opinion of the text here. That brings us to the end of this video. Don't forget, please, to like, share, and subscribe to help my channel grow, and also if you subscribe, I am putting up 3 Say Something Nice videos a week where I endeavour to say something nice about every single Doctor Who episode ever made. There's 830-ish at the moment, and I've done... I'm almost up to 50? Maybe? Have I done 50? Math isn't my strong point. In the meantime, you can leave your comments below this video or on my Twitter @BrandyBongos for any episodes of Series 1. Until next week, please stay safe, make sure to wash your hands, and thank you so much for watching.